today, and this is a format we have used many years, is we don't want boring presentations, we want discussions. And we want you to go home tonight and with the right feeling that you've learned something. And learning is about interchanging information, exchanging information, talking to each other, asking questions, asking stubborn questions if you don't get the right answer. And I'm there to make you do that. And if you don't do it, I'm going to do that. Today, I have an extra help in the form of Anne-Marie Larsen, who is kind of my symbolical daughter today, yes. Only today. And you are a little bit younger, and you are a little bit closer to our target group today.
Hopefully.
And in order to create this bond with you,
let's do the right thing.
Yes, let's do the most important thing first. Let's make a selfie. So now we have a bond, right? Now we are bond forever.
Now it's done.
So you're going to help me to ask annoying questions to everybody?
Yes.
Good. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I can.
Skip kindergarten. Let's go a little bit further.
Okay, I did prepare a longer speech then, but I'll skip to the important part. I'm a Copenhagen girl, but I'm based in London at the moment, where I'm studying at London School of Economics. I've been studying at Copenhagen Business School. And I've not only been an advocate for student housing, but I'm an actual user of student housing. I have lots of friends that needs student housing, so I see myself today as one of the actual millennials that are going to be able to hopefully give you guys some good and critical questions on what it is that we're doing. I've been engaged with student housing, almost in love with the student housing movement for many years, using a little too much time on student housing, not enough time on my education sometimes, but yeah, hopefully it turns out for the best.
What are the 3 most important things for your generation in student housing? Which 3 elements have to be there in order for you to feel comfortable with student housing?
The most important, and I think the one that we face, the biggest challenge right now, is getting an actual place. We're talking 4 walls, a bed, a roof, making sure we have a place and don't have to live 1.5 hours out of the city. So that will be the basic premises. The second one is talking about innovation, entrepreneurship. That happens also outside the classroom. If it only happens inside the classroom, it's a waste of taxpayers' money. So making student housing that fosters and encourages students to meet, that are encouraging interdisciplinarity. So we don't just meet the ones that we study with, but are also going to meet natural scientists and engineers and social scientists. And last but not least, it has to be affordable, because we do not want a generation that comes out highly indebted, that they're really going to have a challenge starting their own life. So I think that's the 3 basic premises.
Okay.
And of course, good party facilities and those
places
kind of
to meet.
Yeah.
And
that'll be the 4th.
Places to put your engine in if you
Exactly.
need repairs. Yes, that's not very important. Our first speaker of today is Martijn Vos, which I will ask to come to the table right now. Let me get my paperwork here. Martijn is a very important man because you represent today the APG, Asset Management, APG. But for us it's APG, or better known as Ambtelijk Burgerlijk Pensioenfonds,
yes.
Which is more familiar to us. This is the largest pension company in the Netherlands.
Yes, APG Asset Management is the investment manager acting on behalf of ABP, which is the Algemeen Burgerlijk Pensioenfonds. And ABP is the largest pension fund, and because they are our client, we are the largest pension fund asset manager of the Netherlands.
That's the right word for it.
Yes.
Do you do student housing here in the Netherlands?
Indirectly.
Okay.
So we invest...
You do a lot indirectly nowadays,
yes.
Right?
Yes, we are not allowed to outright own buildings ourselves. So through ventures we have with several managers, we have participation in some student housing in the Netherlands.
Okay. please join us.
Thanks.
I also want to ask Professor, is there a professor from Vienna in the room? Yes. Okay, please join us. A professor from Vienna, that's a very interesting combination. What is your relationship with student housing?
Well, I'm not a student anymore.
No. I'm very happy for your parents.
I was a professor at the University of Vienna, but now I'm a commissioner, what they call a commissioner for university and research at the city of Vienna. And I think I got invited here because the organizers of the class of 2020 suddenly realized that Vienna is a hotspot for students and therefore for housing.
Okay. All right.
200,000 students in Vienna,
Okay.
almost.
That's more than just Austrian students. Is Vienna a very important international hub for students?
About one quarter, about 50,000 of them do not have Austrian citizenship.
Okay.
Yes.
They're okay.
Foreigners.
All right. The most important guy of today is Frank Uffe. Can you come up as well? Frank is for many years now. How long are you doing this, Frank?
We started 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
It feels like double that.
We're adding a ring every year.
He is the proverbial catalyst, engine, go-getter for this whole program, Class of 2020. Can you explain a little bit about what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I guess it's better to speak in the we form. I mean, 4 years ago, we did start with a small group of predominantly Amsterdam and Netherlands-based student housing operators, looking to find a place where we could discuss what we, considered our dreams and our entrepreneurial ambitions. And that got a little out of control, so to say. So we're now a full-fledged international European think tank and foundation. We're based in the Netherlands, but our partners our partnership base has grown significantly. I think you recognize a lot of the names. And I think together we represent, this was an estimate of the team, and over 200,000 student rooms, those boxes, and some of them, have different colors, etc.
Why do you need to be there? Why is it necessary to organize these events and your whole organization?
Well, I think we kind of rediscovered student housing in the Netherlands. The academic tradition was never about disconnecting universities or education from living together and learning together. In fact, it was not about getting the grades, it was really much about self-development, and I think the traditional Cambridge and Oxford idea still represented. And so we're rediscovering that in Europe, where education obviously is such an important asset when you are young, but also a very important moment in time. At the same time, when you look at the needs of the students, and as we are going more international, and international student mobility is up by more than 100% in the last 7 years in Europe alone, you know that you cannot rely only on your parents' place. And if the idea of student housing then becomes something that is close to the university and close to those cities like Vienna, who is going to take care of them? And obviously, in the current economy or the current way of thinking about what the role of the state should be, universities and cities need partners. And those people are able to be a partner.
An important aspect of the organization is that you really now are one of the first that connects international cities worldwide, not only Europe, to discuss and to develop ideas around the idea of student housing, correct?
Yeah, that's true.
Which normally is just a local, regional, even country organized thing. You did it worldwide.
Yeah, because we're looking at people like Anna Marie, right? She says, I'm a Copenhagen girl, but I actually live in London right now, and maybe next year I'm going to be in Spain. And so that's a new reality.
When I'm in the United States, every once in a while, they know Frank Uffe over there. So you're important.
Well, a lot of my family members actually left in the 1950s for the United States. But one of the things that you ask, why do people join this platform? I think we're adding value in a very simple way. We're connecting people. We're meeting throughout Europe I think we have a few slides that symbolizes that. But we're hosting network events like this throughout the year at different conferences. And it's a growing network, and because more and more professionals getting involved. So one of the things that we've invested in sharing also expertise and news through our database. Our daily tweets have become really successful, and this year we're investing more specifically in creating network tools for our partners to allow your network and your staff also to leverage the knowledge and the connections that we have. One of the things that we also want to establish this year is a board and working groups to work specifically on themes that perhaps the CEO or the CFO or the CMO or the technology partner is there. And a lot of us are looking to get involved directly or indirectly. So that's really exciting. Working groups on technology, on operation excellence, which is so important when it comes to the type of housing, performance benchmarking. Xavier de Jonge mentioned that as an important next step, and I'm sure Martijn would agree on like how do you compare different assets. So those are very exciting things, and obviously we're going to have a whole calendar for next year, including an annual conference again in November. But one of the things that we do, and that's a report that we bring out every year, is the annual trend report, and a lot of you have contributed to that, and I'm really very grateful for that, is like to try to deepen our understanding and to kind of get an overview. And 3 things that we identified this year I think are really, or something that I can contribute to this table before I leave. Number 1, this competition for the millennial, so to say, is increasing very rapidly. And Vienna is an example that we wanted to invite to see how that works, also how the city government understands that, and how city government reaches out to partners, like including universities, companies, and student housing investors to increase or improve the proposition, because it's really worth. And if you don't do it, you basically start lagging behind. So that's number one trend. The second one, which I think is a total change, like a mind changer, is that universities used to be so embedded in the national system since the Second World War. And we have a European Union after the Bologna Agreement, and all of a sudden people start moving around like Anne-Marie is doing. And so we're seeing that universities are now following that. NYU has 16 campuses around the world, including 6 in Europe. So you see that that's a whole new type of university. And the third one, and that's very exciting, I think, and a lot of you are here, is that from student housing being a national or a local activity, all of a sudden we see the rise of the European student investor. And we have identified that as a number 3 trend. And I think we'll hear a lot about it today.
What do you expect of today?
Well, I mean, one thing is that we are bringing back, like last year we talked about the European Renaissance, and it was still very much like like how do we get out of this economic crisis? Today we wanted to bring it back to who are we doing it for? And I think we want to incorporate that learning and develop that into our everybody's model.
How can I become a member of your organization?
Well, you have to.
This is your
exactly. Yeah. This is the
commercial.
Pitch. Yeah. Well, there are a number of our team. I mean, and this is maybe a good moment also to thank the extraordinary work of Janan, of Tia, of Chili, and Wouter. Yeah. And Suzanne, they're all standing there, and I'm sure you've become familiar with them. But go to them, talk to them. If you don't have a chance today, follow up with me or with Wouter or anyone else, and we'll explain how you can get involved. And for this moment, I would just thank you for all being here. Yeah.
Thank you, Frank.
All right.
So I would like to go now to the presentation of the professor. You have an opening statement.
Okay, thank you.
Please go.
Well, many of you will know Vienna, but some may not. So maybe I should start with saying that forget about the Habsburg Empire. That was a long time ago. I mention this because until the beginning of the 80s, Vienna was really a sort of decaying city in many respects. Population was going down from 2 million to 1.5 million. But in the last 30 years, something dramatic happened. So now we are back again at 1.8 million inhabitants. And in the next 15 years, the forecast is that Vienna will grow again by about 200,000 or 300,000 people. That's one thing. The second one is that the student population is growing at with the same speed, more or less. We have now about 195,000 students in Vienna, which is the highest concentration in the German-speaking area. And for a city of this size, with almost 2 million, a density of 10% is very, very high. I know Amsterdam has a higher density, but excuse me, Amsterdam is about half as large as Vienna. We have about 9 public universities run by the state government, about 4 or 5 private universities, and a couple of what we call Fachhochschulen, that's universities for applied sciences. Every second, looking at the age between 19 and 26, every second person you see in the streets is a student. And
Where do they come from?
Austria, of course, mainly. Germans, about 15,000 by now. Okay. As far as the foreign students are concerned, about 70-75% come from members of the European Union. The rest from so-called Drittstaaten, that is, other countries like Russia, some at the university for music, dance, and so on, for the liberal arts, many students from Japan, Korea,
Is there
China.
a specific reason they like Vienna? Sachertorte?
Well, I'm not a Vienna. I'm a Tyrolean, really, so okay. I can speak freely about that. Okay. I think, of course, there are many factors influencing the decision to go abroad. The first thing is your family background, can you afford it? Do they have an academic background, and so on. But secondly, Vienna is a very safe city. It has a very high quality of life. It's relatively, I mean, everything is relative, but it's relatively cheap. Public transport is perfect. You can walk the streets as a woman at night without bothering being robbed or anything like that. So, and the reputation of the universities is they're not Harvard or MIT, but they're fairly good, I must say, among the first 200 according to the Shanghai ranking. So the question
is the city proactively developing, supporting this development? In other words, something happened a couple of years ago. Was that through investment, public investment, private investment? What caused the change so now it...
Yeah, that's the most difficult question to answer.
That's why I'm asking him.
Basically, it happened. Basically. Okay. The city, I mean, the politicians in the city, the administration, is just now realizing what they have within their borders, you know. And it's very important economically because everybody is talking about importing human capital, highly qualified human capital, and so on. And everybody realizes that this is very important indeed, and you have an international competition there to attract this kind of human capital. Still, what the city can do is one thing, and what they're actually doing is another thing. I mean, for instance, they can't influence, at least not directly, the legal barriers to entry and the legal barriers to stay, to get a permit to stay after you finish your studies. That's one of the weak spots of the Austrian system. But what the city can do is subsidize housing for students in a limited way, but still. I should add perhaps that from the 200,000 students, only about 10 or 11% are living in a student home. Okay. The rest is dispersed elsewhere. Hotel Mama, for instance.
Tell me about Hotel Mama.
Well, obviously, you can only do that if you're living in Vienna anyway. But about 15-18% or so still do that. The percentage is going down fast, rather fast. And the percentage of people living alone or with a partner in a just normal apartment is rising.
Okay. Can I ask Marty to join us? I didn't forget you. It's just I had to go, Frank. Marty, Bidger Klimek.
Close.
Is that the right?
Yeah, that's
close. You know a little bit about these students that are traveling across the world.
Mm-hmm. I work with a global network of over 100,000 millennials, and most of them either are currently traveling between places or they have ambitions to do it. It's a huge factor in what they do.
Okay. So what's driving them? Can you understand why things like this are happening in Vienna right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's such a different mindset with this generation. I mean, if you think about the fact that they've grown up 100% with the internet. So they didn't have to learn the internet. They didn't have to translate that. They didn't have to learn social media. And that makes a big difference in terms of like your mindset and your outlook. And their connectivity globally with peers is a huge driving force of everything that they do.
How do you know all of this? What is your background?
I've always worked in youth products. So first in entertainment, then in youth travel products. And then through that, I started working on some global youth initiatives that focused around entrepreneurship, leadership development. And I still run a global competition called Your Big Year. And we uncover talent around the world. And we provide sort of the first step in of allowing a young person to create their own credibility when they may not have any sort of professional skill sets or professional experience. And through that, we've been able to interact with the youth and just kind of really look at the major differences. I mean, what I used to be as a youth backpacker is completely different. What my needs were as a study abroad student are completely different than what they are today. And I'm totally jealous when I see like the student house and wish I had a place like that to stay. But we weren't provided with that. But now you have to provide things with experience and you have to pull it.
Why do you say have to provide? Because student housing, student education, it's kind of a necessity. I mean, they're going to come anyhow.
They are, but there's so much choice today. Okay. So how do you attract the demographic to come to you? And so we spend a lot of time, like from our business standpoint, is that we help companies and destinations understand this demographic and understand where they're missing this demographic with their current business models and with their current strategies. And seeing that in action, it's pretty eye-opening.
Can you give me an example of where you intervened, advised, and things started to change?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about, one of the easiest examples that's a little bit related to this is thinking about hotels. So there was, over the last few years, a ton of uproar around coming from hotels, coming from hostels, trying to, shut down or fight against Airbnb or fight against the whole sharing economy. It's here, and it's coming out in, I don't know exactly how many of the apps have hit Europe, but like in San Francisco, everything is sharing economy. Then there's more and more applications for sharing your car, sharing your washing machine, sharing your workspace. These are just 100% how this generation is going for it. So you can't fight that. You have to figure out what your offering is and why you're unique in the system and what else you can do. And so there's
what makes it unique?
What makes it unique is either you can adapt that type of business model or you can offer other things. So there are some hotels now that are looking at maker spaces. I don't know if everyone knows what a maker space is, but it's a very hands-on innovation hub. It's where you're going to walk in and there's going to be like a 3D printer. There's going to be all sorts of electronics that you can go in there and build innovation. And
that you connect to housing?
And yes, so
Yeah.
it's drawing people into this.
Okay.
And the styles as well that we're finding in San Francisco is there's a lot more work living spaces, right? So all your young entrepreneurs, millennials who are in Stanford, who are in UC Berkeley, your young innovators, they're wanting to live together. And so they're living and working, and they're creating really dynamic spaces with lots of facilities, lots of services a part of that, and they're innovating. So, and that draws them to stay there longer. That draws them to choose places to stay.
So what's the benefit for the developer or the investor to make that additional program in these concepts?
Well, if you have two places to choose from, right? One that maybe provides a common area,
Yeah.
and one that provides, opportunity for innovation, that's the choice that a lot of millennials are doing. There's other places that are taking the route of social good and, what kind of social impact can this place make, or how green can this building be? There's lots of different choices, but I think
Does it make a difference for the students?
Yes.
Yes? It needs to be a green building?
Yes.
It needs to have these common facilities?
Yes.
You cannot get away with student storage anymore.
I mean, I'm sure you can always find somebody, but in terms of, a really successful model, providing something without that is aware of the environment, is not causing to that end of it, is creating the social interactions. This is what this group is going for.
Location-wise?
I think location's important, but I do think, it's the location and the access together.
Okay.
They want that. They want to
Access
be
being you also want to get
the social
out of the city.
Maybe it depends on the city.
No, what do you mean by access? I mean, I
Access
understand-
to each other, like the
Okay.
social interactions.
Okay, you need to be close to where the social interactions are.
Well, I think I'm saying within a building. Like
Okay,
you
okay.
want, I think their primary focus would be, I mean, I can't speak for every city, right? Every city has a different layout, a different feel, different, a different trend to it. So I think that's too general. But in terms of the fact that they want the social interactions with each other, I think that's key.
We have an investor here
Yeah.
sitting on a table. Do you connect to this? These?
Very much so.
You're doing that too?
Yes, we try to.
Where?
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 Well, we are a global investor.
Yep.
Australia is an example.
Okay.
Indirectly here in Amsterdam.
Okay.
And
In
several
Amsterdam,
other
where
places.
do you do that? Because it's so close to home. Australia's far away. You can tell me anything about Australia,
well,
but I cannot verify. I want to verify Amsterdam. What do you do in Amsterdam?
So a company that we invest in only last week announced that it has invested in the student hotel.
Okay.
And I think the product that the student hotel offers here in the Netherlands is, I guess, what you two describe as being a very attractive model for the student nowadays.
Okay. And are you willing to invest in that, in all those soft aspects of the real estate, the services, the additional space
Yes.
that doesn't create income for you?
Yes, because it might sound that it doesn't create income, but it's what the customer wants.
Okay.
And ultimately, if the customer is not willing to buy your housing product, then there's no income at all.
Okay.
So sometimes you need to deliver those product.
3 years ago you were here and you showed your first interest in student housing.
Yeah.
But you said never in the Netherlands. Because we're going to go to, our pension money went to London, as I remember. Because you thought you had a better chance there. And there were, I remember very well, less regulations, which were two driving factors not to invest in Holland. Are things changing?
I would have hoped to have said, not to have said the word never. I don't recall. Then again, the Netherlands, I spoke yesterday coincidentally to someone who's also looking into Europe as a whole, and arguably the Netherlands is one of the most regulated markets in Europe. And that creates, one, an opportunity, but secondly, if you compare it to other European markets, to invest your money in, still other markets are here and there more attractive.
And main reason?
Well, main
Give me two. Give me two.
The product you need to deliver,
Yeah.
which costs you ultimately more, and
Cost more in Holland to realize these projects compared to other places?
yes.
Okay.
And then secondly, which is, I guess, the rental restriction, which in any case was a big problem, and there are participants in this industry which have found a good way to get around some form of regulation.
Okay. That's your ultimate goal.
Yes. Well,
This is for
the
the ones that are not from Holland, this is the ultimate contradiction. This is money from government employees, of course.
Yes.
And their main goal is to avoid regulations. That's the...
That's your interpretation.
That's a short version. That's a short version.
Short version.
Yeah.
I can, but I do not subscribe to that view.
No,
of course.
I have my role in this debate.
I understand why the regulations are there, and it serves a certain purpose. But from a pure financial perspective, some of these regulations do not stack up.
Okay.
When you are an investor like us, needing to invest.
So what would be your most important regulation that you would like to see go away? For instance, the rent, control?
Ultimately, I would personally, not APG, but personally, I would think that is the first and best step.
And that will open up for you the market, and that will allow you to do programs that are the ones that this generation really wants.
Yes.
Also here in this country.
Yes.
Okay. Professor, are investors investing in Vienna?
The question
Or is it all public?
No, it's not all public. It's an interesting question, how much the market is regulated. As far as I understand it, there is, of course, a special law for student housing, but it only applies, Mr. Hubert can correct me, it only applies to subsidized student houses. So if you use private capital, not subsidized in any way, you can do what you want, and you can charge what you want. As far as I can see, the difference at the moment would be between, say, something like 600 euro a month or slightly below that on the private market for student housing, and about 400, 450 in comparable houses that are publicly operated. So the difference is not that large, really.
What will you pay in Vienna for a student house unit? What would you pay in Vienna for an average rental unit, student?
Depends. If you are content with 2 persons in one room. In an old house, you might pay only 250.
Okay.
And
per person or per person? Per person.
Per person. And if you take 1 person per apartment in a new house, in a publicly owned student house, you would pay about 400, 450. But I understand that a new house privately financed that charges 590 a month is full. No problems of filling it.
What do you pay in London?
Oh, you don't want to know.
Yes, I want to know.
In London, I pay about £700, which would translate into per month about 1,000 euros. Yeah. So actually, going back to the investor, there's one characteristic about millennials that hasn't really changed for the generations before. Students are not rich. Rental regulation, I think that's a good thing. And looking at building student housing, it's also about affordability. Because we are also seeing with the increased number of students, many more within a generation is taking up, and they're coming from all kinds of social classes within society. So I think the investors need to be smarter than just going around regulation, but finding how can we make affordable housing within the current scheme so it can either, build can you build also shops there that might be a little bit more expensive for the ones renting that and then make more affordable housing?
Can you ask him that in the form of a question?
How to be a little bit more innovative in actually securing affordability while building in the Netherlands, for example?
I don't get me wrong. I do not disagree with you, but if you have, if you're an investor and you have €100 to invest, and you want to have your parents' pension funds grow as high as possible, you need to make choices. And in that sense, student housing and housing in general competes with office buildings, retail, etc., etc., etc. So for us, that money should go where we can offer the best risk-reward profile for the investment.
So it's a generation conflict.
Maybe a little bit.
Okay.
So I agree with you, but student housing still needs to be affordable, otherwise you wouldn't build it and you wouldn't attract a customer. But there's a certain target market, for instance, that wants to pay a little bit more. I think the biggest challenge is that student housing also competes with normal residential and hotels, for that matter. And if you have too many restrictions, some of the other investments are more lucrative.
Would you fear? Sorry?
I was just going to jump in on that, if that's okay.
Sorry.
I mean, I do think that there is a market among the millennials that, if they have the money, that is willing to spend more for experience, because it is part of what they're looking for. And they are, they're fast becoming big spenders in terms of what they do. And again, like if you're comparing them to the generation before and the way that they spent money, this generation is spending a lot more.
What do you pay for a house in San Francisco?
You don't want to know.
What is it about these Anglo-Saxon markets that you cannot tell it?
Well, San Francisco is under a lot of criticism at the moment because there really is no such thing as affordable housing anymore in the city.
Okay. So what do you pay?
Well, I live just outside the city.
But in general, the general student in San Francisco pays per month?
I would guess that students are paying at least probably at least $2,000 a month.
Oh.
Yeah.
For a unit of
A shared unit.
300, a share unit?
But then
share unit?
there are better pricing within some of these live workspaces,
Okay.
which is also why a lot of them have chosen that.
So that you would expect an upward moving market. I mean, those are prices even.
I know I went to NYU,
Yeah.
and I know my first apartment outside of their housing units, and this is a long time ago. We had a studio apartment that we shared for I think $1,800 each, and that was considered pretty on the lower end.
Each.
$1,800 each a month.
Serious money.
But I think those numbers that are staggering, and I agree, but that proves the point why we as an investor are going to those markets.
Okay.
I think there's another general...
You're spoiling it.
I think there's another general topic that not only students, but people in general tend to flock to cities and stay there longer, and you have more singles nowadays. So there is a huge demand for city space living, student housing, but normal residential. And that's a trend that pushes up rents anywhere.
Yeah.
All right. You wanted to say something.
Now, obviously, the market is very segmented. If you pay £1,000 a month in London, the average income of an Austrian student is about €1,000. So it's obviously not affordable. On the other hand...
It's a parents' gap that
right.
resolves
On
it.
the other hand, among the foreigners, if you have, let's say, parents in Hong Kong and 1 or 2 children, they want to go abroad, there are almost no tuition fees in an Austrian university, public university. So you can spend that amount of money, I should think, rather easily. So there is a market, even in Vienna, for this kind of apartment. Not too many students, but there are certainly some.
Are there questions from the audience?
I will try to do that
Yes.
very quickly. No, that students are the best paying
Yes.
renters in the city, they per square meter. I think it's a very good idea to see not only students living in large complexes, but also to mix it with housing and to mix it with facilities, shops. Why is it
Well, that wouldn't resolve the affordability issue.
I think it is affordable because they're all very high prices per square meter. So I don't understand why investors cannot invest in these kind of mixed programs.
Oh, we can, and if and I agree with you again. Yes, it's the
You being here is totally voluntary, so
but it's the highest rent per square meter, but not necessarily the highest capital value per square meter, because ordinary residential, if you sell it to an owner-occupier in the Netherlands, you can get a higher capital value. And it's these kinds of economics that a developer will look like and make that mix. And if that mix turns out to be as you describe it, then they will do it. If not, they will try and do it differently. And then comes the regulatory framework, and they try to match the two. I guess if that whole package is attractive, people will do it. And I think there are examples that it is being done at present. So
would you trade lower rents with higher stability? In other words, if there were instruments, and I'm sure in specific countries that will happen, that in order to get your return,
yes,
you would like to see guarantees. We discussed that a couple of years ago, guarantees of universities, of cities, that give you more stability.
Yes.
Would it make it easier for you then?
Yeah, that could be. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But yes, yes is an answer. So.
Yes. Well, there's
more questions. Yes.
It's another question for the investor.
Oh.
Don't get scared. And my curiosity, we speak about investments in student housing for investment companies as though they are isolated investments and not part of broader corporate portfolios. Do you not see the value of perhaps a lower return on a particular segment, which is coupled with investments that this segment contributes to, both in purchasing power or in the access of human capital to the city and other investments you're making, and form a portfolio that provides integration?
Yeah.
Good question.
And the answer is yes again.
You're on thinner and thinner ground.
No, certain sites in cities are just not able to build normal residential on, or are not suitable for hotel, and then student housing is a very good solution. And if you then build the product that the millennials want, it's a very good investment opportunity.
Is it a driving design item in Vienna, this combination of functions, or is it still very isolated development, student housing, because of this more portfolio approach of investments?
I should think there are about maybe 6 or 8 non-profit organizations that are building student houses. So obviously for them it's a sort of isolated
So no mixture.
project. But there are a few others, and I guess they're becoming the number is increasing, that are building student houses among other buildings. At least for the non-profit companies, it's interesting to note that for the ÖAD, this is the state-owned, owned by the federal state, student exchange organization really, but they also build and run student houses, that they put great emphasis on a sort of green architecture. Okay. That is passive standard or even energy plus standard, that the houses produce more energy than they consume. And this point of view, the sharing economy is increasing. All that, you see that in these new developments.
Can I?
Yes.
So, I think it's a great point to bring up, because the most successful strategies are really pulling together a lot of pieces, not just with the investors or with the students, but really creating, creating a place where all the stakeholders in this come together. So there's so much happening now with like social impact investments as opposed to like a nonprofit model. And these social impact investments really pull together so many issues that you need to think about, because it is a huge benefit when you've got these students supported in the community, because they give so much more back to what's happening. And if you can retain talent, if you can attract talent, it's a huge topic, at least in San Francisco. We can't attract enough talent for the jobs that they're there.
Do you have very specific examples of these projects, new projects that really connect to this?
There's
idea?
different aspects of them. So I think I'm seeing it a lot more with like creating affordable housing, not necessarily only aimed at students, but what are the frameworks around that? And so there's like very innovative systems coming up on how to build the place, so at a cheaper level, but incredibly environmentally sound. And there's also, again, just focused on how do you actually support and create a secure place for somebody, and then providing them with an integration into the city. Because once somebody has like that security around them, it's amazing what they can do.
Well, just to short point on this, you're talking about, what do the millennials want? And, it sounds like we're really spoiled, like this huge generation that can go around and shop and say, this for my housing, I want easy access, I want it close to the university. I think we need to turn that around and say, what do we want from the millennials? What do we want as a society? Because if you do a cost-benefit analysis on this, the more you kind of put into affordable, good housing that also challenge these young people, the better investors you're going to have in the future, the better employees you're going to end up with. So I think it's a societal task to look at this, not just about what do the millennials want, but what do we want out of the millennials?
So there is a public role.
Oh, there's a very public role. And I think
and what would that be?
I think seating...
Because at the same time, if we start regulating it, there are also some other negatives on that. So...
Well, I think the regulation about affordable housing is one of the really good regulations on this account. But as a society, putting a lot of money into public education, that is the pension funds members, they also pay a lot of taxes to use for their children's education. And probably a lot of these pension fund owners, they are also having children that needs affordable housing. So seeing it as a societal role is also saying, what kind of labor market are we going to have in the future? What are we going to live off? How are we really going to take on the tasks and challenges that are lying right in front of us? How to get competitiveness, how to make sure that we attract talent, that we develop talent. And we can do that within housing. And I think we've been not good enough at it. Okay. Students using too much time finding a place. When they finally find a place, it's just not good enough.
Is the political mindset in the United States such that this is supported?
Well, I think that there's a lot of the millennials are actually rejecting traditional education now. And, and of course, a lot of that has to do with how expensive
Which
our
means that
universities
they
are.
stay home, start working earlier.
Yes, so there's a lot more focus on entrepreneurship and innovation. But I do think in thinking about it, like as this, if you're a student and you're going and you're getting your traditional degree, that's great. But I think, again, thinking about how to bring innovation or how to get them being educated in different ways and how to infuse that into where they're living is ultimately incredibly beneficial, because that's really where a lot of new ideas are springing from these days.
Who invests in student housing in your country?
That's a good question. It's very mixed.
Okay.
Because a lot of the universities cover the costs.
Okay.
They do their own investments.
Yeah. Universities are usually filthy rich, right, in the
Yeah.
United States?
Yeah.
And they are the investors also?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
Not everywhere. It depends on the university.
And they, of course, have the added benefit, what you're talking about, they gain on both sides, have a good housing facility, and that's good for their future growth and development.
But there are specific developers who invest in, affordable housing, and that's a slightly different mindset.
Okay. More questions?
Thanks. It's Philip Hillman. It's really a question for our colleague there from America. In the US, the phrase we haven't heard here today is multifamily. And we were talking about mixing the different types of investment. I just wondered what really the panel thought about looking at student as part of a bigger asset class called multifamily, which is private residential, and it's student housing, and it might be senior living as well. And looking at it as a wider asset class than just a thing on its own. And in the US, that's the biggest institutional investment sector in the US is multifamily. So I'm just curious what you think about that.
Good question. Shall we start with our investor?
Well, I think it's a very valid point, and we like to believe we see the market as such that student housing and residential is a form of rental product.
But I'm saying, I think what he's saying is if you mix the two together much more, that you can eliminate the negatives of one specific asset class with the positives of another asset class. Is that what you're trying to say?
Potentially. I'm just curious as to whether it will be, in the Netherlands, something that people will start looking at not just the private rented sector and student as separate things.
Yeah.
They're both a form of an asset class that in America
Housing.
is still multifamily.
Yeah.
In the UK it's becoming to become
Yeah.
multifamily.
No, very good point. And that's, yes.
But yeah, I guess any city and your buildings, your, let's call it estate, if you are building and developing from ground up, benefits from livelihood and experience and having, let's call it, traffic. So having students in there would greatly benefit, I guess, the ambience and atmosphere and hence ultimately the value of your property. So I think it's yes. If you
But would it be more acceptable inside your company to talk about multifamily housing as a total asset group with several variations on the same theme, instead of just student housing, because separately they have some issues?
I think the two can get more intermixed. Yes, yes.
There was another question over there.
Yeah, hi. Thomas Lebinger from the OAD Housing Office in Vienna. It's not a question, I think it's a comment to the price issue. I think if a student goes to London or San Francisco, New York, they know what they're expecting and they accepting a high price. I think traditionally in Austria, rents have to pay low, and there's no acceptance or not a big acceptance for high prices. And I think it's not for Austrian students. Austrian students would not accept high prices. Only a little part of the international students will accept it, I think so.
Okay. Statement. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, just a remark.
Maybe it's a good habit to say good
Me too,
say who you are. so they can find you.
Michiel Holland.
Yeah.
Just a remark reflecting the earlier discussion of mixing multifamily with student housing. I think the student housing sector as an asset class would benefit from being treated separate by investors, by institutional investors, because it has a lot of different dynamics. And of course, you have to look at the neighborhood and you have to look at the potential of a neighborhood. But I think in all allocation models of institutional investors, there is a decision to invest in retail, in industrial, in office, in residential, and nowadays in elderly homes or in student housing. And the differences are big. The risk-return perspectives are different than with mixed products. So I would say, yes, of course, you can make investments in a mixed-use building, including student housing, but in general, I think that the investment of student housing should be looked at separately, and the sector will profit from that.
You are a real estate dinosaur as much as I am, right?
Sorry.
No, it's not. It's just
A bit younger than you.
That's what you get. That's what you get, right?
And I have 4 children, so I have invested, I think, more or less the same as you.
Okay. So, do you see a change in the idea about student housing? Because if we were sitting here 10 years ago, it wouldn't even be part of our discussion to consider student housing. Do you see the change,
Absolutely.
European-wise?
Because 10 years ago, I was working for the same company as Martijn is. And in those years, we were not prepared to look at student housing because it was not considered an asset class yet.
Right.
So it was just a big mess with a lot of different regulations. It couldn't be seen as a sector at that stage, not at all. It has professionalized so much in the last couple of years, really the last couple of years. And what we also see as a fund manager in student housing is that a lot of institutional investors are still hesitating because they have to do the research, the statistics are not there yet. So it's a difficult sector still to look at, but it offers still a premium in the risk reward to residential sector, more or less in general.
Good. Other questions? Yes.
Can I make a short comment on the gentleman's comment on if you go to London, if you go to New York, you're expecting high prices? Again, turn it around. If I were the mayor of a major European city, I would want to attract people to come to my universities. And choosing a university is much more than just finding where is the best university. It's also about affordable housing. It's also about the city and creating a student environment. And hopefully, for that university, I might stay if I have a really pleasant experience being in London. I might stay there. I might get a job and pay my tax money there afterwards. So one thing is to say they'll go there anyway. I think we do, as university cities, have the possibility to attract talented mass of people coming and staying and contributing to society afterwards. So it's not just you are able to change kind of the destinations of these students, I think.
Okay. If you would advise the city of San Francisco, what 2 measures would you recommend to them to improve the situation of student housing in your city?
It's funny because it's such a debate right now about affordable housing. It's really a major question in the city. And I guess sort of having lived through it in New York where, when I first moved into that city, I lived in an NYU dorm and it was in the East Village. And, it was scary. Like the East Village was very dangerous then. But within the 3 years, it became like the trendiest part of town. It completely gentrified. And now you go there and it's completely NYU. They've bought up basically the entire real estate of that area. So a lot of it, I think, gets driven from the universities and their plans.
So what are your 2 recommendations?
I actually really don't know. I don't know if I have a recommendation on it. I do think that
Safety issues?
Safety issues are huge. But the students...
Rent control
and-
regulations?
Yeah, and finding an opportunity for the students, you know, that they can still be in those areas,
Right.
because more and more they're leaving, you know, like in the case of New York, they're going out to Brooklyn, and then they're going further into Brooklyn and further into Brooklyn to be able to afford to live there.
Okay. In Vienna, what would you recommend the city of Vienna to do over the next 3 to 4 years to improve the situation of student housing?
I would go one step further, maybe you could say. The city of Vienna should lobby the federal government to change the laws of entry and the law regarding the permit to stay, because that's really a big hindrance for people not coming from the European Union to get an entry visa.
So open cities.
Open the city. And the funny thing is, the city of Vienna has a social Democrats majority for about 110 years.
Yes.
And the main hindrance...
I remember the Red Vienna, right?
Right,
That
Red
goes all the way
Vienna.
back, yeah.
It's still rather red as far as the administration goes, but we have a red-green coalition now in Vienna.
So open the city?
Open the city, lobby with the federal government. The funny thing is, the main hindrance is the Ministry of Social Affairs. They are saying unemployment is high anyway, so why should we make it easier for foreigners that make their studies in
But
Austria?
they came
or
for
in
study,
Vienna?
not to work.
Yeah.
What would the other recommendation?
Another one would be take the relations to the universities seriously, because this is a long story, but you're saying the Red Vienna administration on the one side, and after the war for about 40 years or so, the rather conservative universities on the other side. They didn't communicate with each other at all. So that has been changing, thank God, for the last 20 years, but very slowly.
So combining the interest of universities with the interest of the city, which is a very important issue, yeah. What would you are to go to your credit committee. Do you have a credit committee?
An investment committee.
Investment committee, okay.
Serves the same
That's
purpose.
right, that's banks have credit committees, so you have an investment committee.
Yeah.
And you want to invest in 1,000 units in Vienna. What would be your most important argument for them to do it?
That there is a shortage of housing and that it isn't affordable.
Okay. So that last one, so you are going to make it affordable?
Well, I think
That's not a good argument for your investment committee.
no, but any textbook in economics would tell you that the only way to lower pricing is to create supply.
Right.
So ultimately, when supply is being created, it will become more affordable.
Okay. And they will say yes?
Yes.
Okay. What would your recommendation be to the City of London? 2 most important policy changes that would improve the situation of student houses?
I think that they should, most importantly, make partnership with these investors, because I understand the concern. I also actually studied some economics, so I read the textbook, and he's right. It does say that. And doing partnerships between the city government, investors, and students, and making a common level ground, saying what is it that we need, how can we attract it, how can we do it, and how can we maybe change regulation, but also change the mindset of investors, because I don't think that neither students, investors, nor the city government is going to change their mindset on their own. So my biggest
And should the city
recommendation-
organize that? Or should you organize it, or should he organize it?
Well, if we can make a deal today,
Yes,
you know, I'm ready to
That's
go
why we're here.
to London.
That's why we're standing on this kitchen table.
Exactly.
to
I
make
think,
the deal.
you know, it takes, in this case, 3 at least to tango, and someone has to start the dialogue about this. And I think most of the city governments are way too slow on this issue, and that's why it's really good to see investors here today actually going and engaging with this topic.
Any other important questions? I understand. There's another one over there.
Hello. I'd just like to put a scenario to the panel that let's just assume that 90% of our governments are broke, that 95% of
That's not an assumption.
Yeah, 95% of the universities, especially in America, are broke. That our cities are where people want to live, so people are moving to the city. Now, we want to accommodate students in that city. As an investor, how much would it cost? And I'm not talking about New York, Paris, Rome, London. Let's say Copenhagen, Amsterdam, secondary but major cities. How would it cost to buy land, to build student accommodation that you would want to live in, and to get a return on your money? Let's just assume that the government's got no money, that universities have got no money. The only people with money are mums and dads. You know, the baby boomers, of which I'm one. We've stuffed our kids. They haven't got any money. We need to pay for our kids' education. We need to pay for it properly. Right. So how much would it cost, typically, Mr. Bouwfund, if you were to build student housing in Copenhagen or Amsterdam, just to make a reasonable return on your money? I would suggest for anything less than €1,000 a month, you can't do it. Just a suggestion.
Do you understand this question?
Because I think that's the reality.
No, I agree.
Rats.
I mean, this is. I guess your point goes to the affordability point, and that's
it's a market.
Yeah, and it can't be affordability at the current. Yeah. Which depends on what you call affordable, by the way. But
I mean, are you just suggesting that land prices should be so?
No, I'm suggesting that it's a market, and we can have the discussions for the next millennium. Yeah. The land price will be what the land price will be, and the rent price will be what the rent price will be, and the market will decide. It won't be governments because they're broke. Yeah. It won't be universities because they're broke as well, and it won't be students because they're even more broke. The market will decide.
So the question is?
The question is, do you agree with that scenario?
One at least is, I'm not sure about it, because I think that there is also another real estate crisis, at least in our country and in Europe, going on right now. So there is some movement in prices right away, and real student housing, being an interesting asset right now, is able to buy land, or at least developers are able to buy land for a very decent price right now.
I think some of the trends, and I can't speak with full authority on this, but the returns that I've been seeing in terms of social impact investment in affordable housing have been phenomenal, and really, really amazing scenarios. So I do think that as people continue to become aware of social impact investment strategies, aware of like what they provide and how they're set up, and I'm not familiar with how prevalent that is here. It's very prevalent in San Francisco. So I think that some of these models could change that, and we're already seeing that over in our area. But again, I'm not an authoritative person on what that is.
So you had one more?
Yeah, well, just to borrow the market. In Copenhagen, the municipality is putting money into, with private investors, starting building a little. Their big plan is building 300 student accommodations for about the 10,000 that don't have one at the moment, so it's far from enough. But just to say, yes, there's a market, but there's also politicians and people like you and a city government that are able, and hopefully not all of them are deadly broke. And second of all, I think you got to see there's a market, but the need is so big that there need to be taken some kind of responsibility for building affordable housing.
Okay, last question, and then there will plenty of chance later on to have more questions.
It's Jo Winchester. There's been much talk about, in inverted commas, affordable housing. What assumptions is the panel making about affordability? Because surely that's a relative thing. That is a relative idea. And what assumptions are you making about what income students have and how they are funded?
So maybe Vienna first?
Well, first, I can't believe that you can't build student houses for less than, and for a rent and less than 1,000 euros. I mean, I'm paying 1,000 euros for a commercial apartment for 70 square meters in Vienna, and it's a new contract, not dating back to 1920. So it should be possible for anything like, in Vienna at least, if you calculate it commercially, to ask for rents like 600 or 700, it should be easy really. I don't know about other cities, but in Vienna it should be easy. not too difficult anyway.
Is there anybody saying higher, lower?
No on specific numbers,
No.
but I mean, there is, when you set out an affordable housing plan, at least in the way I'm looking at it, it's usually with that specific demographic in mind. So whether it's workers for, you know, a community that traditionally had been living far away from that community, and you're creating space close to that so they're not commuting very far and they're getting the benefit of the local public school systems, and you know, all those benefits of being close to where their work is, but they may not have been able to afford to pay the traditional rents there. But this community is being set out and laid out just for those specific people. So I think in the same way with student housing, that you're looking directly at like what does that demographic need, and creating a plan specifically for them.
I guess the real remark is that, of course, you see some pollution of rental rates due to the fact that there is such an international connection right now. Students are moving all over the place. And if your parents are from a very rich background from other places, then you see rental rates of 2,000 euros, pounds a month easily. So I guess the answer is you should refer that to what the general demographics of an area are, instead of making the exemption the rule in this case. Is that the...
Yeah.
Okay. You're looking...
You didn't really answer my question.
Okay.
What I mean is that it seems to me that there's a general feeling that concessions should be made for students to have, that they should be, it should be possible as a kind of right, that they should have the right to rent accommodation at below market rents.
Of course.
But the thing is that it seems to me that generally money is available, that students, that is to assume that students have no additional incomes or no financial support of any kind, which seems to me that that's not the case. In the UK, we have a loan system, but elsewhere, in Germany, higher education is free or at minimal cost, for example. In the UK, you have to pay £9,000 a year as well as your accommodation. It seems to me that why is it assumed that students have no additional financial support from parents or grants or other things? Because it seems to me that's not the case, that they actually, that money is available somehow.
Yep.
And if that money is available, why shouldn't they pay a market rent? And if they can pay a market rent, that would make it easier for investors and developers to build new accommodation and make a return. But the problem is that it seems to be assumed that students have the right to rent accommodation at below market rents, and that really is the nub of the problem. That's why more development isn't happening in Europe, because the rents are too low.
Okay. In specific areas?
Yeah,
Because
I mean, obviously it
always.
varies across,
Okay.
it's a multi-market market, but...
Issues we're going to discuss more during the day, and I'll make sure it comes back. But I guess the rest of the audience now is starving for a cup of coffee. And it's my duty to give him that. I hope that we come back around 11:35.